Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari, and he is USA Today Boxing Junkie editor, Michael Rosenthal, and both of us are really excited this week, just like every other fight fan. We call this the special edition because we're going to witness something special this Saturday night, an unprecedented 2 for the price of 1 boxing pay-per-view doubleheader live on SHOWTIME pay-per-view. 5 world title fights. The action begins at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific. And the 2 main events are bananas. In one main event, you've got undefeated WBC world middleweight champion Jermall Charlo defending his title against Sergiy Derevyanchenko. And in the other main event, a 154-pound unification between champions Jermell Charlo, twin brother Jermall, and Jeison Rosario. So 6 fights, 5 world title bouts, 2 superstars in career-defining fights, and we're going to break it all down. So make sure you listen before you place that potentially embarrassing bet with your friends, because we've got you covered. Which, by the way, reminds me, Mike, we may have to come up with some side bets this week if we're picking opposing sides on some of these bouts. I know there are lots of good food spots in LA, and I like a good steak.
We'll work it out. There's some tough picks on this card.
Yeah, there really are. I mean, these could go either way. Now, before we talk about last weekend's action, which we're going to get to in a little bit, a couple of news items that I wanted to bring up. First, Adrian Broner, the problem. He was a guest on Brian Custer's excellent podcast called The Last Stand. Now, Broner says he's likely to return in January versus Ivan Redkach. Not a bad return bout, and whether you love him or hate him, I must say it's good to have Adrian Broner back, if in fact he is coming back.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, the guy's a fighter after all. Right. I know he's dabbling in the recording business right now, but he's a fighter. That's how he's going to make a lot of money, obviously. And he still has that ability. Even if you question what he could do in the ring, he could still make money. I saw reports that also that it might be Redkach in January, which is interesting. What's interesting to me is that it could be at 140. Which I think actually would be really good for Broner, because he just hasn't been that good at 47, so he could look strong at that weight. Now he will have been out of the ring for 2 years. He lost to Manny Pacquiao in his last fight. I see he probably wins this fight, which will set up a big money fight, and I think obviously that's what the plan is. But this is one last thing I wanted to throw out. He not only has he not fought for 2 years, he has gone 4 years without winning a fight.
Oh, man. I mean, I think the 2 years is problematic enough, and I love Broner. I think he's a fun guy in person. He always has a kind word, or he'll tease you in a funny way. He's just really good to be around. But I like him even more when he's in the ring and when he's active. Now, Ivan Redkach is already a tough opponent for Broner. You throw in a 2-year layoff. And consider the fact that Redkach already fought this year and making 140 pounds. I mean, I don't know. Mike, I think he's going to have his hands full.
Could be, but Redkach has to go down too. I think Redkach has fought his last 2 fights at 47.
At Walter, right? Yeah,
so he'll have to go back down to 140. Yeah, you know what? I think Broner probably wins this fight. But you're right. Redkach isn't a pushover. So it's Broner. People are going to be watching. Let's see what happens.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned, obviously he's going to look to win and then get into some big bouts after that. Who would you like to see Adrian Broner fight in 2021?
Well, let's say he wins let's say it's at 140 and he wins. That's an interesting concept. You've got the top 140 pounders that we know, the Prograis and the Taylors and the Ramirez's, and I think he becomes at the very least maybe an interim opponent for one of these guys. See if they can make good money against him, and then who the hell knows what happens in the fight if he's at his best. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, those would be events, and I'm sure that's what Broner is looking for. I like the Regis Prograis fight as well, and I could see them building that up really nicely. I like Mario Barrios too. as a fight at 140 pounds. I think it'd be a big test for Barrios and for Broner to, assert himself back again as one of the top players at 140 pounds. Now, also in the news, Carlos Panama Lewis died last week at the age of 74. Lewis was a longtime trainer, will forever be connected to the 1983 bout between Billy Collins Jr. and Luis Resto, where Panama Lewis, who was in Resto's corner, removed the padding from his fighter's gloves. Of course, Resto gave Collins a truly brutal beating. His eyesight was compromised. He didn't fight again. Now, Panama Lewis had his license suspended by the New York State Athletic Commission, and he became a pariah pretty much after that. But, Mike, that wasn't the only notorious thing he was remembered for, right?
Yeah, I mean, not much compares to that. I mean, that's obviously
Right.
the worst thing that he ever did. But his first brush with infamy was the first. He was Aaron Pryor's trainer, so it was the first
Right.
Pryor Alexis Angulo fight in Alexis Arguello fight in 1982. One of the cornermen grabbed a bottle after the 13th round, and Lewis said, famously, "Not that bottle, the one I mixed." The one I mixed. Speculation was that the bottle contained some kind of stimulants. I don't think that was ever proven, but that sort of hung over his head. And then came the tragedy with Billy Collins. Till he died, I guess. Panama Lewis denied that there was any wrongdoing. He actually blamed somebody else. But Resto said no. Apparently Resto said no. Lewis did what he did. To do that is, I just can't, in boxing, short of taking out a gun and shooting a guy in the ring, I can't think of anything that's more. It's just evil. I mean, to take out the padding in the gloves and put the opponent in such a compromising position is just horrible. I guess some guys will just do anything to get an edge.
Yeah, look, I'm no judge of person or character. I'll leave that for a higher power to do. But as a boxing fan, I'm in agreement with you. I mean, he leaves us with some terrible memories, which unfortunately will be a black mark on his name. Is there anything notable that he did at all other than that? It seems like whenever I heard his name, it was always associated with one of those horrible incidents.
Well, this is before my time, but he was a good trainer. I mean, he was Aaron Pryor's trainer. Right. He was good. He was one of the best trainers in the world, I think, before all this happened. And then this thing happened, and then he was just gone. So, and I guess he was. I don't want to feel sorry for him, but he's kind of a tortured guy. I think he thought this was done to him instead of what he did. So he basically lived for a long time with this hanging over his head. Not a happy story.
No, not at all. I tell you what, I'm glad that boxing got it right in terms of revoking his license and
sure.
and moving on. Now, speaking of which, let's move on to the week in review. Last Saturday night, Showtime aired a PBC triple header headlined by the WBC 154-pound world title eliminator bout between Erickson the Hammer Lubin and Terrell Gausha. Now, as both Mike and I predicted, Lubin won a unanimous decision, but not without a hairy moment in the 10th round. And he also had a big moment himself when he had Gausha rocked in the 12th. Mike, what did you make of Lubin's performance?
I thought it was... I'll be a little bit generous. I thought it was a solid performance, but it wasn't the kind of performance that would instill fear in any of the top 154-pounders. He did enough to take a big lead on the cards after 7 rounds, at least on my card, which isn't saying much because Gausha just basically did nothing for 7 rounds. Lubin picked up the pace in the final 5 rounds, as did Gausha, to give him some credit. But he didn't do anything that I thought was particularly impressive other than the moment you mentioned in the 12th round. And Gausha hurt him, as you mentioned, in the 10th. It was pretty hairy there for a few moments. I think that and the knockout loss to Jermell Charlo, I'm not going to draw any conclusions, but it kind of makes me wonder about his chin a little bit because he really got wobbled by Gausha. I guess that could happen to anybody, but it makes you wonder. That said, he won the fight. That's the objective, and I'm certainly not like writing him off or anything like that. I just thought he might have made a bigger statement than he did in that fight.
And I'm sure he wanted to as well, certainly the way he was talking leading up to that fight. And I tell you what, I think I saw Lubin get dropped earlier in his career, actually, by a fighter whose name escapes me at the moment. So I certainly had questions. Kind of hard to say. I will say this, though. I think that it was good for him to sort of take a big punch and to recover and to fight his way through it and fight back. I think it can only help him in the future. Now, what about Terrell Gausha? I mean, he didn't let his hands go, as you mentioned, for the pretty much the first half of the fight. But when he did start throwing more around the 7th round, he had success, particularly in that 12th round when he briefly wobbled Lubin. Assess his performance for us.
Well, he sort of saved his butt, by doing that late in the fight in terms of the way he's perceived. I'll never understand why it happens all the time. I'll never understand why some fighters just refuse to throw punches. He threw an average of, according to CompuBox, he threw an average of 31 punches per round in the first 7 rounds. He landed only 4.3 per round for the first 7 rounds, which is really, really low number. In other words, he didn't start fighting until like round 8. Now, he fought with some urgency after that, but, aside from the possibility of stopping Lubin that we mentioned, it was just too late for him. I'm sure he wishes that he was more active in the first half of the fight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the future holds for him. I'll say this: he looked okay in the final 5 rounds. Maybe he builds on that. Throws more punches the next time he goes out there, and maybe he's learned a lesson. We'll see.
Yeah, interesting point about what the future holds. Because I was thinking to myself, well, who does he fight next? At some point, one name that came to mind, Sebastian Fundora. Now, I don't know if Fundora is ready just yet, just because of what I saw in those last 5 rounds. I thought that if Gausha had fought like that from rounds 1 to round 12, we might have seen a totally different fight. Now, maybe a lot of credit should go to Erickson Lubin for stifling him and keeping him at bay. But certainly I felt like if Gausha had let his hands go a little more, that he could have altered the outcome of the bout. Now, Lubin, on the other hand, is the number 1 contender to the winner of this weekend's 154-pound title unification between Jermall Charlo and Jeison Rosario. How do you fancy his chances against either one?
Well, that version that we saw on Saturday, I don't think has much of a chance against Xavier. I don't want to underestimate him. He's got a good skill set. He's a smart fighter. He's got some power. So I wouldn't completely write him off in the fight, but you need to have more fire. I just didn't see much fire. He did enough to win, but I didn't see the fire that I think you need to move up to the next level, and that's obviously what he'd be doing against the winner of Charlo and Rosario.
Right. I mean, the performance, the sense I got reading social media regarding his performance was that it felt somewhat perfunctory. Like there wasn't anything extra, to it. And maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. I think if he were to, based on what happened in his first fight with Charlo, maybe he wants to box. Maybe he doesn't want to open himself up for countering opportunities or anything like that. That may be his best bet. I don't know.
Good point.
But I can understand why people might feel like, well, the result might be more of the same if he does fight a Charlo or even Jeison Rosario, who's a pretty heavy hitter himself and is not afraid to let his hands go. Now, in the second bout of the evening, WBC World Featherweight title eliminator Tuxtat Nyambayar. He overcame a pretty stiff challenge from Kobe Brady. Nyambayar dropped Brady twice in the early going, but then he lost a few middle rounds before finding his footing again and winning a split decision. Like, a lot of people were surprised by one judge having Brady up.
Absolutely. I thought the right guy won. First of all, I thought the right guy won, which is the important thing. But Don Trella's 115-111 score for Brady was pretty extreme. That means that he gave Brady 9 of the final 10 rounds. I suppose if you gave him like every benefit of the doubt, I mean, that's a possibility, but it seemed pretty extreme. I scored at 115-111 for Nyambayar. So I thought that Brady probably won the fight from the third round on, but 9 rounds is too much. I thought the other 2 cards were fine. They were 114, 112, 114, 113 for Nyambayar.
Yeah, it was a close fight, but I thought that Nyambayar kind of pulled away toward the end after that strong start. Brady was doing really, really well in the middle rounds, and I could see it being close. But I'm with you. I didn't score it, but my scorecard probably would have reflected what you saw. I thought it was pretty clear that he won the fight. Now, Nyambayar is in line to fight the champion, Gary Russell Jr., yet again. He just fought him in February, I believe, and he lost fairly decisively. What are his chances in a rematch if that happens?
Not good. We're going back to the same thing with Gausha. Nyambayar started out on fire. He put Brady down in each of the first 2 rounds, and then I thought he just kind of went to sleep. You mentioned that he rallied a little bit. Yeah, he had some moments later on. I think he landed the bigger fights, but he kind of went to sleep for most of 10 rounds, which is just bizarre to me. I just don't get it. He can't fight, certainly can't fight like that and have a chance of reversing what happened against Gary Russell Jr. I don't see it. I mean, he's got the pedigree, he's got some power. But again, the fire wasn't there again. It was another flat performance. Maybe the long break because the coronavirus has affected these guys. I don't know, but there just wasn't any fire. But in the other corner, there was. I mean, Breedy fought like a maniac for 10 rounds. I thought he had a lot of fire. He was fighting like a guy who wanted to become an elite, wanted to make a statement, become an elite fighter. But I didn't get that from Nayan Bayar.
Yeah, I think that Breedy's made a name for himself. I'd like to see him again sooner rather than later. He's certainly hungry. He's got good boxing skills, really, really fast and tenacious. Got some dog in him. I think he would make for some great TV fights. Now, regarding Nayan Bayar fighting Gary Russell again, I know Russell's played with the idea of moving up, and so perhaps that happens. But if he doesn't, and there's a rematch, I don't see it being any different at all. I just can't imagine that. Yeah, maybe Russell does even better, having seen what Nayan Bayar has to offer. And I don't think Nayan Bayar looked so improved in this fight against Breedy. I just don't see it. Now, in the televised opener, Jaron Boots Ennis, I thought, simply stole the show. Ennis became the first man to stop Juan Carlos Abreu, putting him away in spectacular fashion inside 6 rounds. I mean, he showed every skill in the book as far as I could tell. The guy's only 23, but you can tell he was born in the gym. Now, some would say he graduated from being called a prospect to I guess what you could consider a contender. Mike, would you consider him a top 10 welterweight? It's tough.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Ennis was the best fighter on that card by far. Ennis is a better fighter than either Gaucher or I think right now he's a better fighter than either Lubin or Gaucher. I'm going out on a limb a little bit by saying that. I don't want to put any undue pressure on him, but he reminds me of a prime Roy Jones Jr. The way he's so smooth and patient, even the way he keeps his arms down, which we know can be a little bit dangerous. And then he strikes with this crazy speed and crazy power. Like you said, he just showed us a little bit of everything. It brought back good memories of one of my favorite fighters. And I know he admires Roy Jones, so it's maybe it's not even a coincidence. I thought he was just absolutely terrific. Abreu had gone the distance with some good fighters, but against Ennis, he was just like helpless. You could tell by the look on his face the first time he really got tagged. He was like, "What the hell is this guy?" It's early for Ennis. The jury's still out for him, but he sure looks like he's special. To answer your question, honestly, I think he needs to beat a next level 147 pounder before we know for sure whether he's like a top contender. I want to say yes, though. I just absolutely love this guy.
Yeah, it seems like it would be yes, but I think, I was looking at the list of welterweights, and you got Errol Spence, Manny Pacquiao, Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, Terrence Crawford, Danny Garcia, Dennis Ugas, Jamal James, Mikey Garcia. That's like 9 names right there. So, 10th, Jaron Ennis, I don't know. I mean, there's some guys there on the fringe that have a pretty strong case. I think you can make a case for Ennis, but it's hard to say. I guess a better question is, in your opinion, how far away is he from a world title shot?
So I actually came up with an exact number. I would say within 3 fights. I would put him in with that next level guy that I'm talking about. Because listen, Abreu's we thought he was a really tough guy, really durable guy, but he's not a top guy. So you get him in there with the next level guy. He wins that fight. Then you move up one more level, and maybe now you're talking about a top 7, 6, top 5 guy, something like that. And then when he passes those tests, I think he'll be ready for a touch. So maybe late next year, early the following year. I would hope sooner than later, but he's young. There's no rush. I think he's going to accomplish great things, so you don't need to rush into it. You still have time.
Yeah, I'd give him at least 2 more fights, 2 step-up fights. If I had to choose, I'd be looking at a Chris Van Heerden, maybe a Josecito Lopez in his next fight. What do you think? Who would you like to see, assuming he's 2-3 fights away, who would you like to see Jaron Ennis step up and face next?
So it's funny you mentioned Josecito Lopez because he was one of the guys I thought of.
Yeah.
And that would be a harder fight than Abreu, I think.
Sure would.
Yeah. Amir Khan, I'm not even thinking about like promotional managerial affiliations, just guys that I think that he could probably beat at this time would be a good step up. Jesse Vargas.
Would Khan be a step up though? I feel like Khan. When's the last time
Well,
Khan did anything?
you know what? That's a totally legitimate question. I've just been a fan of Khan's for a long time, and yeah, I think he's still a quick guy. I think he's still, he's got that experience. I think he's still a tough out for most guys. Maybe not the top guys at this point, but for a step up, it might be. And it's a big name. And even Kalviauskas might be. Maybe that's too big of a step. I don't know. But I think he's better than Kalviauskas, but Kalviauskas is good. Maybe that's the second guy you fight, somebody at that level. So anyway, by naming these guys, we sort of give the listeners an idea of the level of fighter we'd like to see him fight, and I see him passing that test and moving on.
Yeah, so do I, and I can't wait to see it all unfold for him. All right, we're going to take a quick break and come right back with our preview of Saturday's monster card.
Oh, you a boxer? Oh, okay. You in a violent sport? No, I'm not in a violent sport. It's art. It's a way of life. This is how we eat. It's time to eat. Hey, yo, Mac, ladies and gentlemen.
Introducing Jermell.
Yeah.
Introducing Jermall.
Zone.
Charlo.
Sometimes you knock someone out. Sometimes you just beat them.
Jermell loves his brother.
They're so close they are just separated by one single bell.
You never put a dog in the pen with a lion.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go. Go. I don't bluff, bro. Aiming at your head like a buffalo. Diamond still shine in a rough hole.
Charlo just vanquished Lubin in the first round.
Best in the world.
Jermall Charlo, the power is for real.
And the sun died. The night is young, though. You a roughneck. I'm a cutthroat. I got a duffel full of hundos. That a love go. Where's the up go? What the though? Where the love go? 5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
It's all about lions only.
Lions only, baby. Lions only.
And the entire sport of boxing is hearing the Charlo twins roar.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
This Saturday, September 26th, live from the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, we've got the card of the year as Showtime Pay-Per-View presents 6 fights, including 5 world title bouts in a one-of-a-kind boxing doubleheader beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. In one main event, undefeated WBC World Middleweight Champion Jermall Charlo will face top-rated contender Sergiy Derevyanchenko. And in the other main event, WBC World Super Welterweight Champion Jermell Charlo faces WBA and IBF World 154-pound champion Jeison Rosario in a 154-pound unification. 2 cards, twin brothers, 3 fights each card, 2 main events, with each card separated by a 30-minute intermission. We've got a lot to unpack here. So we're going to start with the first bout on the first card and go in ascending order. So in the pay-per-view opener, John Real Casimero is going to defend his WBO World Bantamweight title against Ghana's Duke Micah. Mike, let's have the essentials.
Okay. Casimero's last fight, Zolani Tete, November of last year. He scored a third-round TKO. Duke Micah fought Johnny L. Rivera in December 2019. Scored a unanimous decision, so they've been out of the ring about the same amount of time. Casimero's from the Philippines. Micah, you mentioned, is from Ghana. Casimero's 31. Micah's 29. A lot of similarities here so far. Casimero turned pro in 2007. Micah in 2012. Casimero's 29-4, 20 knockouts. Micah 24-0, 19 KOs. Obviously, both of them are 5-0 in their last. Well, not obviously. Casimero's 5-0 in his last 5 fights with 5 knockouts. By the way, Micah 5-0, obviously with 2 knockouts. Casimero 61% knockout percentage. Micah 79. Casimiro, 219 rounds, experienced guy. Micah, 134. Both fight from an orthodox stance. Casimiro's shorter. He's 5'4". Micah's 5'7". I think I have that right. Casimiro's 64-inch reach, and I couldn't find one for Micah.
Yeah, I searched for one too for Micah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 63.5. I found it. I just remembered it's 60.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Don't ask me how I found that. I think I had to go to the gym and measure it myself. It's such an explosive fight. You look at their records and so forth. But one thing that you said that stuck out to me is that Casimiro has 5 knockouts in his last 5 fights, including that KO of Zolani Tete, who was highly regarded going into that fight. How good is this man?
I think he's really good. And I think a key element is that he's also peaking at his absolute peak right now with those 5 knockouts. He's just really on a roll. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I thought he's a little passive for 2+ rounds against Tete, but I guess that's kind of how he fights. He just waits for his opportunities. But man, when he struck, I mean, the fight just ended really fast. That was pretty impressive. He has the experience. He's real quick. He's got a lot of power, obviously. I guess the question with Casimiro is the weight. He started out at 108 pounds. He won titles at 112 and 115. Now he's at 118. At some point, you get to a point of diminishing returns. Yeah. It doesn't look like he's there, though. I mean, based on what we've seen. I'm not sure I see him beating Naoya and Noe at that weight, but, who knows? He looked just like a little beast against Tete. I think he's probably a threat to anybody. He's a good fighter.
Excellent fighter, it seems, and a confident fighter. I've been reading his interviews and so forth, and he's been very dismissive of Duke Micah, and I would assume a lot of people have been dismissive of Micah because a lot of people don't know who he is. Mike, in your based on what you see, give us your thoughts on Duke Micah. I've got some thoughts as well that I'd like to share, so maybe we can share some notes for sure.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, it seems like I watched some video. He seems like a solid guy. He throws a nice jab. I like his aggression. He throws hard punches, which not all guys do. He tries to hurt you. And he's fought in the UK and the US, so he has some international experience. I think that's a good thing. That said, this is a really big step up for him, I think. I think we'll know what he has after this fight. You don't know for sure. I just fear it might not go well for him.
Yeah, you nailed it when you said big step up. It really, truly is compared to the level of opposition he's faced. But I tell you what, I think he's as ready now as he ever could be for this kind of fight. I've known Duke Micah for many, many years, or been following him for many, many years. I should say he was a 2012 Ghana Olympian. So he has that experience. He fought out of Ghana, then moved to the UK. He was trained by Lawrence Carl Loco, who's a very well-respected trainer in Ghana. Also trained Richard Comey throughout much of Comey's career. Trained Comey when he fought Robert Easter Jr., for instance, in their first world title bout together, their only world title bout together, as Comey's now trained by Andre Rozier, who also trains Duke Micah. And Micah for a bit there was floundering, but since he's gotten with Rozier, I think he's looked really, really good in his last 2 fights. I've had the pleasure of being ringside for them, and I was extremely impressed by the improvements. Is that enough to beat Casimiro? Well, it's prediction time. Mike, what do you think?
I'm going to go with Casimiro by a 6th round knockout.
I like it because I'm going against you this time. I got to roll with my Ghanaian brother.
You're
for what
so
it's worth.
loyal.
I am to a fault. This may come back to bite me because I don't know if I'm picking this one. I'm picking this one with my heart, maybe more so than my head. But I do think there's an opportunity here. The only thing I question is Duke Micah's chin. He was dropped in his last fight by Haniel Rivera, I believe was the name of the opponent. However, he popped right up and proceeded to put a beating on him. It's a big, big test for him. But I'm going to go with Duke Micah to shock the world and deliver a 6th round TKO himself. So get the steak ready. I'll be looking at steakhouses in LA when this all dies down, and we'll get to laugh and joke over one. Now, the second fight on that card, another world title fight. Brandon Figueroa putting his WBA World Super Bantamweight title on the line versus Damian Vasquez. And again, Mike, break it down for us.
Okay, Figueroa's last fight, Julio Ceja, November 2019. It was a split draw, if you recall, just a brutal, brutal fight. Vasquez fought Alejandro Moreno just this past February. He scored a 5th round knockout. So he's fought a little bit more recently, but nothing there isn't a huge gap there. Figueroa's from Velasco, Texas. Vasquez fights out of Las Vegas. They're both 23. Figueroa turned pro in 2015, Vasquez 2013. Figueroa is 20-0-1, 15 knockouts. Vasquez 15-1-1 with 8. Figueroa is 4-0-1 with 4 knockouts in his last 5. Vasquez 3-1-1 with 2 knockouts. He's 1-1-1 in his last 3. He lost the unanimous decision to Juan Carlos Payano, who we'll be talking about later. Figueroa 71% knockout ratio. Vasquez 47. Figueroa 106 rounds in his career. Vasquez 85. Figueroa orthodox stance. Vasquez is a southpaw. Figueroa is 5'9". Vasquez 5'5". Figueroa 72-inch reach. He's got quite a long reach for his weight. Vasquez, I couldn't find a reach on him.
Yeah, you know, we've seen what's been going on in the stacked 122-pound division. Emmanuel Alim, Stephen Fulton, Angelo Leo winning a world title a couple of months back. Where do you rank Figueroa, who I'm sure is raring to get back in the ring? Where would you rank him in the stacked 122-pound division?
Well, I think you have to consider him in the mix. You know, that's for sure. I personally believe that Luis Neri is probably the best of the division, even though he hasn't even fought there yet. I just think he's an absolute beast. But we'll see. Akhmadaliev, Angelo Leo, you mentioned, Daniel Roman. These are all good fighters. These are all really good fighters. And I think you got to say Figueroa is right there with these guys. I would say, from my personal perspective, that Figueroa might be a step behind in terms of his skill set and athleticism, but I think he compensates with his fitness and his toughness and his ring smarts. He's a good fighter. He's just not a really, really skillful guy, but he's such an incredibly tough, durable, fit guy that he's just going to give everybody problems. I think he proved that against Sergiy in his last fight. Sergiy came in like 100 pounds overweight in that fight. And not only did Figueroa still fight the guy, but he stood toe to toe with him and just banged for most of the fight, which really showed a lot of guts from my perspective. It was just brutal. But it also showed how tough he is. And I think toughness can go a long way.
Now, can Damian Vasquez stand up to, based on what you've seen of Vasquez, stand up to what we know Brandon Figueroa is going to deliver on Saturday night?
I'm not sure how much of a threat Vasquez is to Figueroa, but he's probably the right choice in terms of entertainment value. I mean, Vasquez has said recently that he wants it to be a firefight, and he'll probably get one. Yep. I think he's just an okay boxer himself. You know, he lost a wide decision to Payano and fought to a draw with a guy who had a sub 500 record. So he'll probably have to outslug Figueroa if he hopes to win. I just don't see that happening, but it could be really fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds like you're picking Figueroa, though, right?
KO 9.
I like it. I like Figueroa TKO 10, so we're on the same page there. The question is, are we on the same page in this fight? The first main event. Jermall Charlo putting his WBC World Middleweight title and his undefeated record on the line against Sergiy Derevyanchenko. Let's start with the essentials.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Jermall's last fight, Dennis Hogan, December of last year, TKO 7, Derevyanchenko, Triple G, October of last year, lost the unanimous decision, but it was really close, really, really close. Jermall's from Houston, Derevyanchenko, Ukraine. Jermall's 30, Derevyanchenko 34. Jermall turned pro in 2008, Derevyanchenko 2014. Jermall's 30-0, 22 knockouts. Derevyanchenko 13-2 with 10. Jermall's 5-0 in his last 5 with 3 knockouts. Derevyanchenko is only 3-2, but the 2 losses were to Danny Jacobs and Golovkin, both close fights. 73% knockout percentage for Jermall, 67 for Derevyanchenko. Jermall 147 rounds, Derevyanchenko 93. Both fight from an orthodox stance. Jermall's 6 feet. Derevyanchenko's 5'9". That's an advantage. Huge reach advantage. 73.5 for Jermall and 67.5 for Derevyanchenko.
Interesting. That's really, really interesting. I'm sitting here, and as we speak, I'm wavering on my prediction, and that's because I believe that Sergiy Derevyanchenko is by far the toughest opponent of Jermall Charlo's career. Would you agree with that?
Well, Did you say career or as a middleweight? It's definitely, I think, his toughest is a middleweight for sure. I mean, he's got some pretty good victories.
Yeah, Julian Williams. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would compare that to Derevyanchenko 160, but sure as heck, definitely at 160 pounds. Is it important that Charlo look good, make a statement here, or is the win really the only thing that matters given what's in front of him?
I almost want to say it's always good to just get the win. I mean, that's the objective. I think in this case it is good enough. Derevyanchenko is just too good to expect anything more. A victory, any kind of victory, I think lifts Jermall to the next level, which I think is what he wants. I think he's stagnated a little bit at middleweight as much as you can. Being a consistent winner. I think he wants to take that next step. That said, a statement would give his career a big boost if he can beat Derevyanchenko more easily than Jacobs and Triple G did. And I think that's a possibility. I think one could argue that he's the top guy at 160 pounds, unless Canelo Alvarez fights again at middleweight. I think if he wins convincingly, I think you could say he's the number one guy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that if he does beat Derevyanchenko consistently, then he's the number one guy. No, in terms of the style between the style matchup between these two guys, how do you see it playing out? You mentioned the reach. Do you think that's going to be an important factor when they square off?
I hadn't really thought too much about that. It could be, I guess, if Charlo fights behind his jab and tries to use distance, but Derevyanchenko's got so much amateur experience and he's such a smart fighter. He's dealt with taller guys his whole career. I think they call him the technician for a reason. He knows what he's doing. I think it's a tough. This is why it's a 50-50 fight in my book. It's both guys are just so good at what they do. It's a perfect style matchup in terms of competitiveness. Who has an advantage? I mean, I don't know. I know this. Derevyanchenko is going to be all over Charlo. He knows what he's doing. He's a tough guy. He's got power. It's going to be really hard for Jermall.
So with that said, drum roll, who are you picking?
Well, I can't pick somebody and say it's a 50-50 fight. So I'm going to say it's a 51-49 fight. I see Charlo as a complete fighter. He can box. He can punch. He has experience in big fights. He hasn't faced this kind of test at middleweight, but I have no doubt that he could give anybody at 160 pounds big problems. It's also obvious how good Derevyanchenko is again. You don't push Jacobs and Triple G the way he did unless you're a special fighter. I think he's a special fighter. I just think, and then you have to ask the questions, maybe is the third time the charm for Derevyanchenko, but I'm gonna go with Jermall. I think he's as good as I've always thought he is. He hasn't proved it at middleweight, but I think he proves it in this fight. I think he's just a little bit too much for Derevyanchenko. I think he wins a close but unanimous decision.
I think it's a great assessment. I tell you what, I've been wavering on this, but now I feel strongly once again. I'll tell you why I was wavering first. The more I thought about it, and that reach thing actually stands out to me because Charlo has a great jab. I love his jab. I love the way he sticks it. And I think it could be a factor here if he doubles up on it, if he keeps Derevyanchenko at bay. And I think he could catch Derevyanchenko coming in. However, I watched clips this morning of Derevyanchenko versus Toriano Johnson, and my goodness, did he beat the crap out of him. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, man, this is going to be one tough fight for Jermall Charlo. I don't know how he's going to beat this guy. But I tell you what, I think he's going to make a statement. I've been listening to what he's saying. I know he's a gym rat. And he's so calm. He's so focused. I think that he is going to make a statement in this fight. I like Jermall Charlo to establish himself as the man at 160 pounds with an 8th round TKO of Sergiy Derevyanchenko and an excellent fight with an excellent performance.
Yeah, that's bold. I think, honestly, this is the toughest call on the card. I think this is even a tougher call than Jermell against Rosario.
Yeah, maybe right. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I may feel differently tomorrow. Maybe we should have recorded this on Friday night or right before.
Well, remember, you got to go with your gut. You got to go. That's right. If you keep going back and forth, you're just going to get lost.
That's right. All right, we're going to take a brief intermission and then come back with part 2 of Charlo Doubleheader.
Oh, you a boxer? Oh, okay. You in a violent sport? No, I'm not in a violent sport. It's art. It's a way of life. This is how we eat. It's time to eat.
Hey, yo, Mac, ladies and gentlemen.
Introducing Jermell.
Yeah.
Introducing Jermall.
Zone.
Charlo.
Sometimes you knock someone out. Sometimes you just beat them.
Jermell loves his brother.
They're so close, they are just separated by one single bell.
You never put a dog in the pen with a lion.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go. Go. I don't bluff, bro. Aiming at your head like a buffalo. Diamond still shine in a rough hole.
Jermell Charlo just vanquished Lubin in the first round.
Best in the world.
Jermall Charlo, the power is for real.
And the sun died. The night is young, though. You a roughneck. I'm a cutthroat. I got a duffel full of mundos. That a love go. Where's the up go? What the though? Where the love go? 5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
It's all about lions only.
Lions only, baby. Lions only.
And the entire sport of boxing is hearing the Charlo twins roar.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
All right, we're back and ready to roll for part 2 of our analysis of Charlo Doubleheader Saturday night Showtime pay-per-view beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. And this is the second card of the doubleheader, and we're starting off with the first fight on that card, a battle of former world champions Danny Roman versus Juan Carlos Payano, 12 rounds. Mike, let's have the essentials.
Okay, Roman's last fight, Akhmadaliev, January of this year. Payano, Luis Neri, July of last year, which ended in ninth round knockout loss for Payano. So he's been out of the ring for quite a long time. Roman's from LA, as am I. Payano's a Dominican who lives in Miami. Roman, 30 years old. Payano, 36. They actually both turned pro in 2010, unless I somehow got that wrong. Roman 27-3-1 with 10 knockouts. Payano 21-3 with 9. Roman is 4-1 with 1 knockout in his last 5. The loss against Akhmadaliev. Payano 3-2 with no knockouts. Lost to Inoue and Neri. Boy, those are 2 tough opponents.
Seriously.
Roman 32% knockout percentage. Payano 38. Neither guy's a big puncher. Roman 211 rounds, got a lot of experience. Payano 155. Roman fights from an orthodox stance. Payano's a southpaw. They're both 5'5". Roman is a 68-inch reach, which actually is pretty long for that size.
Yeah.
Payano's 64.5, so he's like a T-Rex. So actually, Roman's got a big a reach advantage.
Yeah, and I think that will probably serve him well, although I know it's tough to jab with against a southpaw, but how good is Danny Roman? I mean, he's former unified champion. He's won multiple world titles throughout his career. Is he given the respect or even the attention that he deserves based on what he's accomplished thus far?
I think he's a very good fighter. He lost his titles to Akhmadaliev in January, but it couldn't have been much closer. And remember, Akhmadaliev is an Olympic medalist. I think he was a bronze medalist who's supposed to have a really high upside. So he's a lot of respect. And Roman gave him all he could handle. Roman probably isn't going to knock you out. You know, we mentioned that the relatively low knockout percentage, but he's got good skills, works really hard both before and during the fights. He's a world-class guy. He's a really good fighter.
What about Payano? I mean, you mentioned his last 2 opponents. Perhaps doesn't quite tell the tale. Most fighters would lose to Inoue and Luis Neri. That's a hard doubleheader. Is he still a threat, and can he beat Danny Roman?
I would answer the first part of that question with a qualified yes. Listen, he was, like, as you just alluded to, he was stopped by 2 huge punchers in Inoue and Neri. And between those fights, he outpointed a pretty good fighter in Damian Vasquez. And again, Roman isn't a puncher. So, Payano's not going to be in that kind of danger against Roman. But is he good enough to beat Roman? I think he's good enough to make Roman work and push him a little bit, but I don't think he's going to win the fight.
Yeah. So how do you see Roman winning then? What's your prediction?
I think it's Roman's going to win a clear unanimous decision. I just don't think Payano can keep pace with Roman, who throws a lot of punches. He's really busy in the card. I just don't see him. I don't see him keeping up, and I think in the end he loses a clear decision.
Yeah, Roman has been talking about knockouts in recent weeks based on what happened against Akhmadaliev, that he doesn't want to leave it in the judges' scorecards. But I think what you pointed out with regard to his power is what's going to be the difference in this fight. He's going to land plenty, but I can't see him taking Payano out. I'd be very impressed if he were able to do so. But I'm with you. I like Roman to win a clear, wide, unanimous decision. Now, in the second bout of the second card, we've got another world title fight. This one for the vacant WBC World Super Bantamweight bout, which was vacated by Ray Vargas, who suffered a leg injury and is going to be out of commission for quite some time. Was given an opportunity to none other than Pantera Luis Neri versus Aaron Alameda, 12 rounds. Mike, give us the breakdown.
The Panther. I love that nickname.
Me too.
Neri's coming off that knockout of Payano in July, this past July, so he fought recently. Alameda, last fight against Jordan Escobar in April of 2019. It was a third-round knockout, so he'll be out of the ring for 17 months, if I did my math correctly. May, June, July. Yeah, 17 months. It's quite a long break for him. Neri's from Tijuana. Alameda, also Mexican, but he's based in L.A. Neri, 25 years old. Alameda, 27. Neri turned pro in 2012. Alameda, 2014. Neri is a perfect 30-0, 24 knockouts. Alameda's 25-0 with 12 knockouts, so no losses between these guys. Obviously, they're both 5-0 in their last 5. Neri has 5 knockouts in his last 5. He's got 11 straight knockouts. Alameda's 3 knockouts in those 5 fights. Neri's 80% knockout percentage, which is high. Alameda 52%. Neri 130 rounds, 125 for Alameda. They're both southpaws, both 5'6". Neri has a 66.5-inch reach, 67 for Alameda. So there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And well, a lot's changed for Neri, though. I think we should point out one, he's got a new trainer, Eddie Reynoso, who also works with Canelo Alvarez, Andy Ruiz, Frank Sanchez, Oscar Valdez, a host of other, Brian Garcia, a host of other fighters, and also a new division. He's now fighting at 122 pounds. We know that he struggled to make 118 toward the end there, didn't make weight for his last fight, which was canceled. Will being in a new division affect him?
That's a legitimate question. I think there's 2 ways for me to answer that. As you mentioned, he had trouble making 118, which makes me think that he should be fine at 122. But he also has admitted that he's lacked discipline in his career. Yeah. So that makes me wonder whether his natural weight might actually be 118. Although he said he feels really good at 122, which is natural because you don't have to cut weight the same way. He's also talking about fighting at both weights. He even said he'd like to win titles at both weights. So we'll see. I saw that, yeah. Yeah, I think he's going to be fine at 122. I think this guy is just the absolute complete package. I have no reason to believe he won't bring his power up. It's just one division. But obviously we'll have a better idea after Saturday.
Yeah, I like what I'm hearing from him so far. I thought one interesting thing he said was that he did mention a lack of discipline, but said that for this fight, the pandemic has made him disciplined. I mean, he's basically had nothing to do, so he's been in the gym working with Reynoso, and based on his social media pages, that's all he's done. So I expect him to be at his very best. But excuse me, let's talk about his opponent, Aaron Alameda. Mike, who is he? How good is he? And is he a threat to Neri?
So once again, it's sort of difficult to say because he's fought only in Mexico with one exception. He fought once in the States a while back. In fact, he's only been to one scheduled 10-round fight, which I find really interesting. Otherwise, it's been 8 rounds or fewer. So to say that this is a big step up for Alameda is an understatement. I watched a little of him on YouTube. He seems like another one of those solid guys. He seems to be a tough guy. He goes to the body a lot, which isn't surprising because he's Mexican. Yeah, I just think in this case he's up against a buzzsaw. I doubt he's going to last very long. But to be fair to him, I mean, I don't know really because I'm basing that on very little information.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous fight for Luis Nery. However, I'm going to go ahead and make my prediction right now. I think that a lot on the line for the guy. I mean, stepping up, new trainer, new division, world title, a lot of goals, and trying to put to rest all the things that's happened to him in the past. I think he too makes a statement on this night. I like Nery to win by 9th round TKO.
I want to say KO 1, but I won't. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that bold. I'm going to say Nery KO 4. I think he's going to take him out pretty early. I think he probably is just a lot better, and he's going to catch him, and that's going to be that.
That's going to be very, very interesting fight night, and he's one of the bigger attractions on the card, but none bigger than the main event, a 154-pound world title unification bout, WBC World Super Welterweight Champion Jermell Charlo going up against the unified champion, WBA and IBF counterpart, Jeison Rosario, 12 rounds. Where do we begin? None other than the essentials. Mike, let's hear it.
Okay, Charlo last fought Tony Harrison this past December, KO 11, sensational win in the rematch. Rosario, Julian Williams, January of this year, KO 5, another sensational win. How often do you have guys coming off fights that are so sensational before they meet? It's really special. Charlo from Houston, Rosario's Dominican. Charlo's 30, Rosario's only 25. This is only the start for him. Charlo turned pro 2007, Rosario 2013. Charlo's 33-1, 17 knockouts. The only loss was to Harrison, and he avenged that disputed decision. Rosario's 21-1 with 14 KOs. Charlo 4-1 in his last 5 with 3 knockouts. 5-0 for Rosario, 3 knockouts. Charlo 50% knockout percentage. Rosario 64%. Ton of experience for Charlo, 226 rounds, 91 for Rosario. Both fight from an orthodox stance. They're both 5'11". Charlo's got a reach advantage, another reach advantage, 73-70.
Oh, man, this is a tough one here. I actually struggled with this one more than I did the other main event, and I could see anything happening in this fight. But let's start with some of the attributes that really stand out. This is a potentially explosive match between two guys who aren't afraid to stick their nose in there and get busy and take a shot to give a shot, which leads me to wonder, who is the more powerful of the two?
That's really hard to say. I see them both as power punchers who could end any fight in an instant. It's kind of hard to separate them in that regard. If I had to, though, I'd probably lean a little bit towards Rosario because I see him as a particularly big, strong 154-pounder. I always think that concept is weird because they're both at the same weight, but I think Rosario's just naturally a little bigger, a little bit stronger. Yeah. I mean, he just overwhelmed Julian Williams, not only with his ability, but his strength and his power, man. That was just something to watch. And Charlo doesn't have a particularly high knockout percentage for what that's worth, although he's stopped a lot of the guys in the past few years. So I think he's sort of coming into his own in terms of his power. I guess the bottom line for this fight is just don't look away once the opening bell rings.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that Rosario is the bigger puncher. He's fought at 160 several times before, and you can tell just how physically opposing he is. You mentioned the J-Rock fight where he simply walked through him. However, I don't know if he has the better chin, and that may be the difference in this fight. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. But I tell you what, if Jeison Rosario wins, that is 2 monster victories on his ledger for 2020. Do you think he would be the leading candidate for Fighter of the Year?
I would say he'd be one of the leading candidates for Fighter of the Year. Certainly, I'd have to start going through everybody. But man, oh man, to beat opponents like Julian Williams and Jermall Charlo back to back, I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. And in a year where nobody's going to fight 3 or 4 times, that's going to be really, really hard to beat. I suppose you could say the same thing about Charlo if he wins. To come back and knock out Harrison after losing the first fight and then beating Rosario, especially if he beats him convincingly. I think that's also really impressive. I think he also would have to be in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the thing is, You're talking about Charlo, right?
Yeah.
Well, he fought Harrison on December.
Oh, you know what? I screwed up. You're right. So
Yeah,
for him, it would only be one fight.
Right. I mean, it's like 2 more weeks, and he would. And honestly,
I screwed up.
I wish they could. Honestly, wish that they could just ignore that and make it December to December or something like that, because he's certainly deserving, given what he's accomplished within the past 12 months. So I think your point still stands. This is an incredible fight. 2 guys who are hungry, determined at different stages of their career, both wearing titles. Mike, who are you picking?
So I said that the Jermall, Charlo, and Derevyanchenko fight was the harder one for me to predict, and it was. But this one was also really ridiculously hard to pick. Again, I think we're looking at a 51-49 fight. Charlo's a proven guy. He's done it over and over again. We know how good he is. Rosario looked amazing against Williams, no question about that. But it was just one fight. I think you have to say the jury's still out on him, at least to some degree. I think he can win this fight and continue to win at a really high level, but I don't know if we know that for sure yet. I'm going to go with the proven guy in this case. I'm going to pick Charlo, and not only that, but I'm going to be a little bit bold. I'm going to pick him by a late knockout. I'm going to say KO9. But I wanted to throw one more thing out. Everyone is focused on power in this fight for obvious reasons. Jermell has been outboxed a few times. I'm thinking against Jackson, against Harrison in the first fight, although that was more or less a 50-50 thing. It's possible that Rosario outboxes him and wins the decision. I think it's a possibility. It's just something to keep in mind.
I was surprised if he outboxed him and stopped him. I tell you what, I don't want to make a prediction for this fight. I really, truly don't want to put myself out there like that, because I think it's such a dangerous fight. Certainly, Charlo has been outboxed, and there are times where he's been frustrated in there, but he's so determined, and he has so much experience that I believe that may be the difference here. I believe Rosario naturally is a better boxer than Charlo is, but I don't know if he takes a better shot, and I don't know if he's got the sort of conditioning that Charlo is going to bring to the ring. And we saw what Charlo did to Harrison in that rematch. Now, he doesn't like to hear that he made adjustments during that fight, but he certainly did make adjustments during that fight, and that's what ultimately led to the TKO. And I think he's going to have to make adjustments here. I think Rosario is going to be extremely dangerous early on. He's going to be coming forward. We spoke to him last week. He's going to be bringing the fight to Charlo, and Charlo's going to have to use his legs more than he has in recent years. A little head movement, use his jab, and I think he's going to have to take his time and set up the knockout, but I believe he will. I'm going to go with Charlo via late TKO as well, around the 10th round, in a brilliant, tense, high-paced chess match, if you will, between 2 of the best fighters in the game. I can't wait to see how all of this unfolds. Now in the prediction league, Mike is 16-5. He's doing well. Just not as well as me. I am 17-4. Obviously, we've got one pick. We're gonna be even after this card. I'm gonna be pulling away thanks to my compatriot. Duke Mike.
This reminds me of the Lopez Comey fight.
Jeez, that's right. I did it again, Mike. Why did you say something before I?
No way, man. I got. Hey, let me say one last thing before we sign off. Before we go. Before we end this. I think the odds probably are that one of the Charlo brothers is going to lose.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to expect that. I mean, we're both picking them to win these fights, but it's reasonable to think that one of them is going to lose. So I think we're going to lose. Both of us are going to lose a fight, but that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating, so dangerous to make predictions, because I think you're bound to lose no matter who you pick in those 2 fights.
Yeah, you sure are. And I was really tempted to predict to pick Rosario, because I just have a funny feeling about that fight, but I discarded that feeling and just tried to look at on paper what I see here. But there's a potential for upsets and a lot of fights on this card. Once again, guys, this Saturday, September 26th, beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, Jermall Charlo versus Sergiy Derevyanchenko, Jermell Charlo versus Jeison Rosario, 2 huge world title bouts, plus 3 more world title bouts on the card, so you do not want to miss that. And with that, that brings us to the end of this show. As always, you can find the PBC podcast on the PBC website, on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, pretty much everywhere, iTunes, you name it. So be sure to tune in, subscribe, check us out, and come back and listen to us next week for more boxing talk on the PBC podcast.